Hey, amazing viewers, I love connecting with you all around the world. Stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to share will leave you inspired and ready to take control of your own life. In today's story, you'll hear about an incredible twist that no one saw coming. Also, if this is your first time here, press the subscribe button and join our incredible journey. It was late, and the dim glow of the kitchen light illuminated the tired face of Sarah Matthews as she sat at the worn kitchen table. The only sound in the room was the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the occasional rustle of paper as she scribbled down numbers on a notepad. Her fingers moved mechanically, adding and subtracting, but the reality of the situation remained a crushing weight on her chest. It had been a long day. Sarah worked as a nurse in a local hospital, her shifts stretching far into the night. And even then, her income barely covered the bills. She had 2 children, 13-year-old Daniel, who had recently developed a love for reading, and 9-year-old Sophie, a girl with a heart full of dreams. Both children were growing fast, and every day seemed to present new challenges that came with raising them alone. Sarah had always done her best to provide for them, but the truth was hard to swallow. Her paycheck was simply not enough. The summer was fast approaching, and the excitement in her children's eyes was palpable. They were looking forward to a family vacation, a trip to the beach they'd always talked about. But as Sarah reviewed her bank account, she knew there was no way she could afford a trip, let alone the added costs of getting there. There was no extra money for fun, for adventures, or for the memories that every child deserved. Her thoughts were interrupted by a message notification on her phone. It was from her parents, Mark and Linda. They ran a successful family-owned construction business, which Sarah had relied on for financial help during tough times. For years, her parents had been her rock, offering both emotional and financial support when she needed it most. But things had changed recently. The business had slowed down, and her parents had become more distant, as if something was off. The text read, "Hey Sarah, we need to talk. Things at the business have been harder than we thought. We can't help as much this year. Sorry. Let's catch up soon." Sarah stared at the message, her heart sinking. She understood, of course. Businesses went through rough patches, but the weight of their words hung heavy in the air. It seemed like there was no way out of the situation. That night, after tucking Daniel and Sophie into bed, Sarah sat in the living room, the weight of the world on her shoulders. She tried to hide her frustration, but as her children whispered about their summer dreams, she felt a wave of guilt wash over her. They wanted so much, just a simple vacation to see the ocean, feel the sand between their toes, and forget the stress of everyday life. How could she deny them that? The next day, Sarah decided to visit her sister, Emily. Emily's life was a stark contrast to Sarah's own. Emily's family had the luxuries Sarah could only dream of: a big house, expensive vacations, and a life without financial worries. Emily was married to Greg, a successful corporate lawyer, and together they had 2 children, 11-year-old Ben and 8-year-old Olivia. Their life was a picture-perfect version of success. When Sarah arrived at Emily's house, she was greeted warmly by her sister. But Sarah couldn't help but notice the shiny new car parked in the driveway, the kind of car that seemed so far out of her reach. "Oh, nice new car," Sarah commented with a smile, masking the envy she felt. "Yeah, a bonus from Greg's firm," Emily replied casually, not missing a beat. Sarah's heart sank even further. As much as she loved her sister, she couldn't help but feel the unfairness of it all. How was it that Emily's family had so much, while she was struggling just to make ends meet? Yet, Sarah kept quiet, suppressing her feelings and not wanting to create tension. She had always prioritized family peace over confrontation. That night, as Sarah drove home, her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. She had been taught her whole life to be humble, to be patient, and to work hard. But there was a growing sense inside her that something wasn't right. Something about the way her parents had distanced themselves from her was gnawing at her. Little did Sarah know, The truth was about to come crashing into her life in a way she could never have imagined. The next few weeks dragged on for Sarah. Each day seemed like a repeat of the last, a cycle of exhaustion, worry, and a constant battle to make ends meet. But the excitement in her children's eyes never faded. Sophie and Daniel were still hopeful, their dreams of a summer vacation alive, even if Sarah's heart was breaking with the knowledge that it wouldn't happen. How could she tell them that their simple wish was out of reach? She promised herself she would find a way. But deep down, she knew the reality was far too harsh to ignore. Then, one morning, a text message from her mother shattered the fragile calm Sarah had been holding onto. "We're going on a family trip next month. The business is doing better than we thought, so we're treating ourselves. You guys should come too, but I understand if it's too expensive for you right now." Sarah read the message twice, the words blurring together. She had to take a moment to breathe. Her hand shook as she reread it, the tightness in her chest growing. Was her mother serious? They had just told her they couldn't offer any more help because the business was struggling. Now they were planning a luxury trip, a family vacation, while Sarah was left to scrape by with nothing. She sat in her living room, staring at the phone, lost for words. It was as if the walls were closing in around her. The unfairness of it all felt suffocating. How could they say they were struggling and then turn around and take a lavish vacation? A familiar voice broke through her thoughts. "Mom, who's that from?" Daniel asked, his curiosity evident. Sarah looked at her son, her chest tightening again. "It's from Grandma," she said quietly, trying to mask the rising frustration in her voice. Daniel and Sophie didn't notice, as their minds were focused on the simpler things, like summer fun and what they might do during the break. They didn't know about the email that had just arrived from Sarah's father, either, confirming the vacation plans. It all felt like a betrayal. Her parents had helped Emily and her family for years, always offering the best of everything. But Sarah was different. The sacrifices Sarah had made for her children were never recognized, and her hard work never seemed enough. Her parents had always favored Emily. But this was a slap in the face. They had lied, used their struggles as an excuse, while secretly living a life of luxury. The day of the family trip arrived faster than Sarah expected. She had no choice but to go to the airport. Her mother's message still rang in her ears. "You should come too." The thought of showing up, just to watch them indulge in their wealth while Sarah and her children struggled, felt unbearable. But she knew this trip wasn't about her. It was about saying goodbye to Aunt Eleanor, the woman who had always been there with kindness and love. The morning of the flight, Sarah woke early, her mind racing. The airport was busy as usual, filled with travelers of all kinds, but there was a strange energy in the air. As she stood in line with her children, preparing for their flight to Arizona, her heart sank as she spotted her parents. They were standing at the first-class check-in counter. Her father, looking the picture of ease, was laughing with the attendant. Her mother, with her polished look, was chatting with Emily and Greg. It didn't make sense. They weren't going to Aunt Eleanor's funeral. They weren't struggling. They were preparing for a vacation. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She had to make sure she wasn't imagining it. She tugged at Daniel's arm and whispered, "Look over there. That's Grandma and Grandpa." Her son looked, confused. "Why are they over there, Mom?" Sarah didn't know how to answer. All she knew was that her family had just betrayed her. They had made her feel like she was alone, like she was the one who couldn't provide, when in reality, they were enjoying the privileges of their wealth, while Sarah and her children fought just to survive. In the middle of the crowd, Sarah stood still. The weight of it all hit her like a tidal wave, and she suddenly realized that the silence she had kept for so long wasn't helping anyone. Not her, not her children, and certainly not her relationship with her parents. With a burst of courage, she walked past her parents and toward the economy class line with her children. The truth was out now. The anger, the confusion, the unfairness. They would no longer be hidden. And in that moment, Sarah knew something else. She couldn't stay silent anymore. Her family's lies had been exposed, but now it was time for Sarah to reclaim her voice. And that, she realized, was the most powerful thing she could give her children. The rest of the flight was a blur for Sarah. The pain in her chest hadn't subsided, but as she sat there beside her children, she felt something stir inside her. A sense of clarity, even strength. She had been living in the shadow of her family's expectations, always doing the right thing, always sacrificing for the sake of peace. But what had it gotten her? A life of silent resentment, a heart full of unspoken truths, and children who deserved so much more. As the plane ascended into the sky, Sarah leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes. Taking a deep breath, the landscape outside the window was breathtaking, but the internal shift was far more significant. It was time for a change. She had always tried to shield her children from the harsh realities of life, always tried to protect them from the disappointments that weighed heavy on her shoulders. But they deserved better than that. They deserved the truth. She had made the decision. There was no going back now. When she had sent that photo to the family group chat, a mix of emotions had overwhelmed her. Relief, anger, but most of all, a sense of empowerment. The truth was out there. It couldn't be hidden anymore, no matter how uncomfortable it made her family. But as the notifications from the family group chat kept coming in, Sarah's thoughts began to shift. Her family was angry. Yes, they felt exposed, vulnerable, and perhaps even betrayed. But there was something more profound in the reaction that Sarah hadn't anticipated. She wasn't the only one who had felt the sting of favoritism, the unjust burden of silence. Her relatives, some who had stayed quiet for years, began to speak up. Some expressed their shock and disappointment. Others voiced their support for Sarah, applauding her bravery. The truth had a way of unraveling the facade that people often hide behind. For too long, her family had hidden behind their wealth and power, pretending everything was fine, pretending that they hadn't made choices that hurt Sarah. But now, with that single photo, she had forced them to face their reality. The aftermath wasn't easy. Her parents didn't call for days, and when they did, it wasn't to apologize. It was to explain, to justify their actions. But Sarah knew that wasn't enough anymore. She had been justified in her anger, in her disappointment. The emotional toll had been heavy, but something about standing up for herself, for her children, felt freeing. She realized that she no longer needed to carry the burden of their lies or their unfair expectations. At the funeral, while Sarah reflected on her Aunt Eleanor's life, her kindness, her unwavering support, she realized that the message her aunt had left behind was simple yet profound. Love and integrity come from within. Her aunt hadn't been wealthy, but she had lived a life full of love and honesty, never hiding behind facades or false pretenses. It was a lesson Sarah had always known deep down, but had only just begun to live. As Sarah sat with her children in the diner later, a new sense of purpose took hold. She had done the right thing. Yes, the truth had been painful, but it had also freed her. It had allowed her to shed the weight of years of silent suffering and to teach her children a far more important lesson than any vacation or material possession could offer. She would teach them that integrity, love, and standing up for what is right are the greatest gifts they could ever possess. And as she looked at Daniel and Sophie, both of whom had witnessed their mother take a stand, she knew that the greatest gift she could give them wasn't a luxury vacation or a life of ease. It was the courage to be true to themselves, no matter what. Because sometimes the truth doesn't just set you free. It teaches you how to live authentically and to find peace within yourself, even when the world around you is anything but. And that, Sarah realized, was the most powerful thing of all.